Let's go ahead and get started. This webinar is going to cover what's new in SolidWorks Simulation 2015. I know the marketing department pushed it out as a top 10 new features for 2015. My name's Samantha Bailey. I'm an applications engineer here with SolidExperts, and I'm their FEA expert. But in the interest of time, I've whittled it down to my favorite top 5 new features for 2015. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, one quick thing I'd like to point out is that SolidWorks this year has done a bit of rebranding with their simulation packages. I'm sure you're all familiar with the simulation package specifically that covers all of the structural suite of FEA products. However, we also offer a couple other simulation products, one of which is motion simulation that covers things like kinematics, time-based, as well as event-based simulations. We also offer a plastics package, which is great for plastics products that are, for example, injection molded, and it does a great job of viewing the stresses incurred during a lot of the plastics forming processes. We also offer a sustainability tool, which is great for the impact of your products in terms of your product life cycle. So we can see the global impact and material impact, things like that. And then we have our CFD tool, SolidWorks Flow Simulation. However, for the interest of this webinar, I would just prefer to cover things that are new in the simulation suite itself. Okay, so what's new this year is that SolidWorks is offering a simulation standard package. So this is pretty great for a lot of users. It's our baseline product. However, now it includes not only static simulations on parts, but we can also now include assemblies. You also have access to the time-based motion simulations, as well as fatigue simulations, which is a pretty big deal. And then we have still our simulation professional package, which covers simulations like frequency, buckling, thermal, drop tests, pressure vessels, etc., as well as a new feature we're going to talk about, which is the load case manager, and something that was new in 2014, which is access to SolidWorks' materiality database, which has an enormous amount of material data downloadable for you to import into your material library. And then also our simulation premium package. That hasn't changed. Includes our nonlinear solvers as well as dynamics, which includes any harmonic vibration, random vibration, time history plots, and shock response plots, as well as composites simulation. Okay, so jumping right in to my top 5, start at 5 and work my way backwards. So number 5 is a performance enhancement that we have this year. It is the Intel Direct Sparse solver. So this is going to be dedicated only to Intel machines, and it's going to be a more efficient version of our direct sparse solver. So we have enhanced memory allocation, especially for multiple core processing, as well as improved solution speeds. And as the year progresses, we'll have more data and metrics provided to back this up. But initial testing shows that for Intel-based machines with multiple cores, this solver has been shown to increase efficiency and solve time, which is pretty important. Okay, on to the fun part. Number 4. This is our dynamic loading and fatigue studies. So my background is in structural dynamics. For me, this is one of my top two, but I'm a little biased towards structural dynamics. So this is pretty cool. Previously, all we had was static study options to import into a fatigue study. So we could only take results from our static studies, simulations, and use that to calculate our fatigue studies. Now in 2015, we have the ability to import loads from random or harmonic vibration analyses. So these are dynamic studies that we can import data to generate our fatigue studies. This gives us a much better ability to predict cumulative damage to our product. So this is a great way of enhancing our ability to verify the durability of our products. And here's a quick screenshot for those of you familiar with fatigue studies. Under the loading option here now, it's the same menu that it always has been, but we have the option now if you have previously run any type of dynamic study, you have the option to import that as the loading scenario for our fatigue plot. Okay, number 3. This is a bundle. So there's a couple of new things for our nonlinear studies that we have in 2015. One of the most important things that is going to be a huge time saver for a lot of people is the support for self-contact on a face. So this is great for parts with swept or lofted features, especially parts that have faces that bend back and can contact themselves. Previously, the only way to deal with that was to generate split lines and set up a specific contact set using split lines. That's not the case anymore. So this really simplifies our workflow for nonlinear models. Another new feature in 2015 that we have is to be able to see the results as it's processing. We've had this ability in static studies, thermal studies, flow studies even, but up until now it hasn't been possible to do in a nonlinear study. So this is great for giving us instant feedback on what's going on with our model. We can actually watch it iterate through each time step and be able to see immediately if there's some kind of issue with either our setup or how the results are looking in our study. So we can stop it if we need to before we have run through multiple time steps of our solution. So here's an example of just a spring. So as the spring is being compressed, you may notice that it's one feature. So it comprises one face. As this spring is being compressed, the same face is going to come into contact with itself. Previously, the only way to deal with this would have been to split up that face in the areas that it would contact itself to generate multiple faces to specify our contact set. Now, in 2015, in a nonlinear study, when we go to specify a contact set, we have the option under the type here, this checkbox for self-contact. So this allows us, when we have one face selected, to also select the option for self-contact only. This is a big deal, and it's definitely going to be a huge time saver for a lot of people, especially running nonlinear studies. Now here's what the see result as it's running option is going to look like. You'll have the typical solver window pop up as you go to run your solution, but you have another option down there at the bottom that says show intermediate results up to current time step. This is going to allow you to actually incrementally view the results as the problem is solving. So if you see an issue, you can immediately cancel or pause the simulation. This again is a big time saver, especially for nonlinear studies that can take hours and hours to run. So instead of wasting that time as well as the data that it accumulates as it's solving, you can stop that if you need to, or view the results and make changes as necessary. Okay, up to number 2. Again, this is a sort of a combined benefit here, but there's been a couple new updates in how we deal with shells in simulations. We have now what's called the shell manager. So some of you may have noticed that SolidWorks is trying to improve the user interface during a lot of the simulation parameters windows. So this is a case of that, where you're going to have a tabular interface now that's going to give you a nice little table at the bottom of your screen that allows you to manage all of your shell definitions live, which is much more convenient for a user to be able to see what's going on as opposed to having to drill down through the feature manager and check on each shell property individually. It's also going to allow us to easily group similar materials. So we can create now groups of shells that have similar thicknesses and material properties and only apply that to that group. So it gives us much more flexibility in terms of control for our different shell settings. And it also will give us a graphical representation of a couple of the different shell properties. Another good update in 2015 for shells is automatic self-bonding. So those of you that work with sheet metal are really going to love this. Parts that are folded up next to each other, you know you have some manufacturing clearances in there, especially if that edge is going to be welded. You end up with a little gap. Well, in 2015 now, the shell contact has been improved, so it automatically bonds that self-contact, including cases where there is a gap. So I'll show you a good example of that. Okay, here's our shell manager. It gives you a great list of the defined shells that are in your model actively. And it's displayed here at the bottom of the screen. Like I said, SolidWorks is going to this new display user interface down here at the bottom of the screen. So you're going to start seeing this a lot. But this is very convenient because we can adjust this display to see the shell materials on the screen, color-coded, in the list, and we can see all of the shell thicknesses right in front of our face. So this is especially great if you have many shells or a large sheet metal assembly. This helps you easily manage the different properties of these shells. Okay. Here's my example of the automatic shell bonding. Previously, it might be a little hard to see through GoToMeeting, but the gussets at the bottom of this table, bottom and top of this table, are folded pieces of sheet metal. So there were gaps designed into that part because they're going to be welded in production. However, this isn't practical to show in our model, and we need to be able to run a simulation on it. So previously what would happen, as you can see in the first image on your left, is that the edges of those gussets would start to separate from itself because the software couldn't handle that bonding situation when there was a gap. It wasn't honored. Well, now in 2015, in the image on the right, you can see that that automatic shell self-bonding is honored. And you can see you get much more accurate results in that case. So these are just a couple of the great enhancements for shells in 2015. And finally, my number one pick. This is something that's pretty simple, but it's always the simple things that are the best. We now have, and I mentioned this in the beginning of the webinar, we have what's called a load case manager. This is similar to our shell manager, where it pops up from the bottom of the screen. And you have a great tabular interface now to be able to view multiple loading scenarios. This makes it very, very simple to set up a large number of loading conditions in one easy-to-use table, as opposed to setting up multiple studies using tabs along the bottom of your screen, like we're all used to doing. Now it can all be managed in the same table in one study. There's multiple filters as well for focusing just on different options like the fixtures, loads, and connector loads. This is all managed in the same interface. You can also, and this is probably one of my favorite things about this, is that you can combine multiple loading using formulas. So for example, I'm just going to use a car suspension for example. We know that when you set up a static study, you run a loading in one direction, say a vertical load. Well, what happens if now your car is also turning around a banking? Not only do you have a vertical load, but you have a centrifugal load. Well, using this formula option, we can combine these multiple loading scenarios into one analysis. So this gives us much more accuracy in terms of the stress results or displacement results, any type of results that you want to see when you have a combined loading scenario. So this is a very, very powerful tool. And then also, it's very simple to track results. It's all in the same table, in the same interface. So this is what it looks like. Right in the feature tree, you have the option there for the load case manager. So it's very simple. Just right click and edit the definition of that, and you get this table at the bottom of your screen that displays your load cases. They're all color-coded for ease of use. And this also might look similar to those of you who use a lot of configurations. It's essentially the same thing. It's just setting up multiple configurations of loading scenarios. So the second load grouping there, the load case combinations, it's very simple to add a load combination. And it's just done using very simple equation, and it pulls all of the data from any combination of the primary load cases that you have specified. And then at the bottom for tracking results, you can very simply add a sensor to view results in a certain location and track the different results that you had previously set up in your results folder for each loading scenario. So all you'd have to do is click on what those results are for a specific load case, and it would update your display instantly. So this is a super powerful tool that allows us, instead of having, say, 6 or 7 different studies, to combine all of this into one study. Makes your life so much easier, and solving multiple loading scenarios much more efficient for a lot of the users. And okay, so that is my top 5. If anybody would like to see these live in SolidWorks, let me know, and we can arrange either a demo or we can do something after the webinar if you'd like to. I'd be happy to show you how all of these are handled in SolidWorks. So I hope that was a nice little teaser for what's new in 2015, and everybody's going to go run out and play with it. Does anybody have any questions? I'll be here. I'll leave the session open for the next 5-10 minutes for questions. Okay, so thanks everybody, and have a great afternoon.